Hello, good evening, and welcome to yet another lovely evening here in Nairobi as we discuss another interesting topic. As I said, they are always interesting, aren't they, Wawero?
Always.
Karibuni, as we say here in Kenya, and thank you for making time to spend an hour with Waweru and I and our guests this evening. Today's talk is about social media. Most of us use it on a daily basis. Some are logged on and engaged so often, at times every 20 seconds. And we ask ourselves, what are the benefits using the various social media platforms? And today we've got with us to talk about the benefits or non-benefits, Modoni Maingi, Dennis Ndavi, Charles Kungu, and of course, Waweru Njoroge. And thanks to our team behind, Elijah and Evans today. Thank you and welcome to the show. For those watching us on YouTube and Facebook, you can ask your questions or make comments and we can bring them up on screen. And you can also follow us on our Facebook and Twitter handles, which is @Gr8leadership Live, 8 being number 8. Or email us at gr8leadership@gmail.com. So Waweru, I hope the week has been lovely, has treated you well.
Yeah, can't complain. We're in a good space right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Modoni is coming on board. Hi, Modoni.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Fine, thank you. We started the show without you. You're right on time. So, Waweru.
Yeah, sure. Let me kick it off. I'd like to say, as usual, thank you to our guests for making time to join us this evening. As Martin has said, we're going to be discussing social. Hey, already started. Social media. Thank you so much. So we're going to kick off as usual. Ask our guests to introduce themselves very briefly, then we get into the show itself. I'm going to start ladies first. And although you can just give us a brief introduction of who you are, I'll then ask Charles to do the same and finish with Dennis.
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Modoni Maingi, and I'm strategist out of Nairobi, Kenya, but currently the head of some international digital campaigns team globally.
Next one, Charles.
Good evening, everybody. So my name is Charles Kungu. I'm a Google certified digital marketing professional and have been at it for the last 10 years. And welcome to the show. Let's keep talking. Thank you.
Dennis.
I'm Dennis Ndavi. Good evening, guys. I describe myself as a creative integrated marketer, also as a storyteller, and I do marketing stuff, and I bring things to life.
All right, so remember, if you have any questions for our panel of guests this evening on social media, get them in quick, fast, minus slow. We'll see if we can get them answered in the course of the evening. But right now, I'd like to kick off with the question I'm going to ask all of you, actually, is how has the evolution of social media over the last 10 years changed human interactions in Kenya? I'm going to start, Charles, with that question.
Good. So 10 years takes us back to the year of our Lord 2010. And as you can remember, back in 2010, most people still used to use postage stamps to make messages and get official letters of electronic bills, stuff like that. Much of that has normally changed right now. So most of the people, if you have a query, instead of doing letters, other than the scenarios where you're using loyals or things that have to be stamped or to be credited to authenticated data, right now everything is on social. You have an issue with your Zuku, you write a message on Twitter and they respond. If they don't respond, you cause havoc and then they bring somebody to your house. So much has changed and it's all about customer experience. How we're doing it. We're doing it differently. People have channels and avenues of expressing their disappointments as well. So, which is just one of the things that has helped in social in getting people to get what they want, when they want, and how they want it. Yeah, that's it from me.
Modoni, what's your take on the aspect of how social or human interaction has changed in Kenya over the last 10 years because of social media?
I think social media is one of those things that essentially flattens a lot of access to different things. So as Charles has mentioned, access to service, but also access to information. and access to people that you typically would not interact with in your day-to-day circles. So I think the biggest shift has actually been the widening of social circles. From what I used to understand before digital media, it was about 150 people. Now it's up to 3,000. So I think that's one of the biggest shifts that has actually happened.
Dennis?
I can track my 10-year journey. 10 years ago, my phone was analog, wasn't it?
Yep.
It was for, okay? Never would I have thought that would be the integral tool for doing everything that I do. Little would I have thought, years back, I remember I had an argument with somebody, and I told them, where's that thing you're supposed to send me? And they told me, I sent it on WhatsApp. And I blindly replied, WhatsApp is not a form of communication. This is me now. WhatsApp is all my clients. So yes, it's been a radical shift, and yeah, it's just for me to embrace change.
Okay, cool. I'm going to come to Modoni with another question. Just something I just realized when you guys were talking about that aspect of interaction. Yeah, you can now tune each other via social media. It doesn't have to be we meet at that phone booth next to KICC and what have you. But yeah, tuning each other is another thing that has really changed. Modoni, what are some of the social myths and misconceptions about social media?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is the idea that it has a lot of negativity. I think the best thing about social media is it actually allows you to curate who you follow, the content that you see, pretty much everything that's essentially exposed to you. And so if you choose to have a productive interaction with the technology, then that is something that can definitely happen. That said, even the idea of control is essentially a myth on social media. And this is because a lot of the things that we do see are pushed to us by algorithms. I like to describe the Twitter algorithm as an algorithm of rage. I feel like it serves you the content that makes you angry, and so therefore you're in that app interacting from a space of anger, and then that creates more drama, and so people stick to it for that reason. So there are different types of controls within social media, in as much as you'll try and curate what you can see. And yeah, it's one of those things that has that nuance.
Okay, Charles, what has traditionally been the most effective influencer marketing platform?
Good. Traditionally, we had various things that we used to. If you could remember, when back in the day, when you're watching wrestling, they used to give us adverts about how there was an advert that used to go like chapati kosika. Then there was a lady who was making some mandazis and stuff, chapatis using a particular unga. That you can remember from that time back then. So you could tell that traditionally the TV used to make sense because somebody can see the figurative aspect of it. For most of the people, TV used to work for the parents. You could reiterate an advert and remember it based on something that was said on TV. Like there's one for Omo, unaosha, unangarisha. You can remember all those things. Traditionally, TV used to work. Right now, you want to build, let's say like Safaricom wants to bring in a new product for using M-Pesa, maybe to pay for something and you can utilize later on in the future. They use a digital platform to talk about it. It is less expensive, it is faster, and influences more people because you have bigger audiences on the digital spaces than it were in the traditional age. Yeah.
How do bloggers play into that?
Bloggers, that's where was mine?
Yeah, I'm just asking. Let's follow up to you.
So what bloggers do is, in essentially, they take up. Let's say if you want to do a brand, let's say you want to do a particular activation. I want to talk about, let's say, I'll give because I can talk about now like the M-Pesa and the great Eliud Kipchoge. Eliud Kipchoge was doing a marathon, but the whole world knew that Eliud was running and Eliud was from Kenya. So Safaricom took the essence of changing the M-Pesa and changing it, used all the various different channels to bring in people and mentions about using influencers to talk about that particular brand, that it became something to reckon with globally. People got to know about the M-Pesa platform, which is a very good platform, but the driving force was digital, which was used again by people who had influences that most people with magnitude of number of people reach on a per person basis. Yeah.
Thanks, Charles. Now, Dennis, what's the fastest growing social media platform?
Right now, I think without even batting an eyelid, it's TikTok. Okay?
Okay,
And I think the current big furore out there has only managed to give it, sign more attention to that medium and drawn more people to it. Literally, they have billions of followers, particularly within that Generation Z. It owns those guys. For me, I think I'm a Generation X or something. I tried it. I did not understand it. But when I looked at the numbers, I was in shock. And the fact that all it does is that thing, give you videos. I read somewhere, it was actually said from Zuckerberg. And he said, the reason why my platform is so successful is because it sounded so insane in the beginning. That's why it works with humans. And I think that's the same way with TikTok. It's just booming.
Yeah. Okay. Modoni, in terms of now following up, in terms of what is the fastest growing, who are the new kids on the block in terms of new social media entrants? I think it was something like Gr8leadership or some of those newer ones that people might not know so much about, but might be able to challenge TikTok somewhere down the line.
To be very honest, I have no idea about the new entrants. I think what has been interesting is to see how social media companies are essentially cannibalizing other people's businesses. And so if you remember when Snapchat first popped up, what happened on Instagram is they introduced the filters, they introduced the story formats, they essentially took in the ideas that built Snapchat and ran with it. And now we're increasingly seeing that with Instagram following the model that TikTok has on Reels. In terms of competing against the big giants, this is one of those spaces in which you essentially need to come in like a unicorn. And so something like TikTok is essentially a unicorn. You look at Facebook and its growth versus MySpace, that was a unicorn, and so on and so forth. And so I haven't seen any that I would class as a unicorn at this stage, but who knows? This is one of those spaces that leapfrogs. And so by next year, we could be looking at another platform with X billion plus users.
Actually, there's something you just triggered in terms of, I'm going to stay with you on this question. Do you think that social apps, right, have become electronic versions of the garden shed?
I would say so, yes, in terms of how they're initially designed. But what tends to happen with social apps and with a lot of digital tools, because of the amount of data that they hold, they're able to quickly basically redesign and redeploy different designs because they're able to see how their users are interacting with different pieces. And I like to look at it in this way. There are several companies that always say they want to be digital first and they want to digitally transform. But if you think of it, if you think of digital native companies such as Facebook, for example, there's somebody purely dedicated on the camera on your feed. They have whole production teams around that, not to mention the feed in itself, not to mention the entire product in itself. And so it takes a lot to actually build something like that. And it takes a lot of reiteration and redesign based on how your users interact with things to quickly redeploy different tweaks. So that's essentially how I'd look at it.
Okay, thanks, Modoni. Dennis, what are the laws about social media privacy in Kenya?
Well, I remember the topic was in debate. The debate has gone much further, like in the US, where they actually had the lobby groups to pressure the likes of Facebook, and they're the first ones that flagged it. In Kenya, I don't think we have a defined policy on that yet.
Okay. I'm sure it's something that's
to add on to that. I think to add on to that, in Kenya, what they've said is, according to the law, it just says that it protects data that person has shared. However, the people argue about somebody who shared it publicly they had the sole intention of sharing it to the general public. So nobody can justify that it was actually wrong for them to use that data when the person who posted did it voluntarily. So, well, that's a myth around it.
Okay, fine.
Maybe I can just add a little bit more to that conversation. I think from a brand perspective, there's a lot. It's important for brands to begin to design with data rights in mind, because this is a discussion that's coming sooner rather than later. And so what I've seen a lot of brands doing, and what I've also been doing in my work, is basically just following the GDPR principles, which are the EU data rights and design rights principles, just as a sort of proactive measure rather than reacting by the time the laws come. Because if the gold standard is the GDPR, then working towards that alignment sooner rather than later is just, the best case scenario, because this is something that's bound to affect a lot of brands in the near future.
Thanks, Monique. Charles, I'm going to ask this question. Okay, yeah, because typically I'd say, because this is a question about females, I should ask it to the females, but I'm going to go against the grain and say, I want to look at the increasing number of people, especially women, using pseudonyms on social media. Why is that the case?
Good. So most people who are now active on social, forget about the Generation Z who are actually doing their keep on TikTok. Then there are the other people who are somewhere in the mid and LSM category, about their, let's say from early 20s to about 30 thereabout. So they want to work, most of them are socialized. So the only way they remember you is using, just the same way you want to make something trend, you use a hashtag, you want to make your name to be shorter. So most of them, if you check their IDs, somebody shows up, the ID versus the person on digital is totally different, but they want a cool name, a name that somebody can remember, and obviously the curves to go with it, that's what I'd say. But maybe Budhoni can shed some more light.
Yeah, I think, technology, just like any social space, is impacted by the same societal issues and the same social norms that we essentially experience across the board. And so just because you're in an online space doesn't exempt you from what is termed as technology-assisted violence against women and girls. And this happens in very many different ways. It could be, the overt cyberbullying and harassment, all the way to what we've seen around, pedophiles being predators towards young children and young girls. And so I think the idea of having an anonymized account from women's perspectives is actually to ensure that you are less susceptible to that type of environment, and to also ensure that you do not receive any backlash that directly now comes back into your actual, real life, as has been stated. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. Dennis, what's the role of social media in the bigger picture of marketing right now?
Well, I can tell you the first breakthrough and the biggest thing it ever did, particularly for small businesses, is it's free. Back then, the smaller entities used to cry about the burgeoning costs of advertising. But social media is the only easy way to reach thousands of people without spending a cent. So number one, that's the biggest breakthrough. Number two, it's also the easiest way for any business to actually create its brand personality without breaking the bank. All you have to do is have a solid brand strategy and communicate consistently and engage your followers. Okay? There's so many things. Yeah. There's the sheer scale of the communication that you can give. Because all of a sudden, you're not counting the cost of flyers. Okay? You just press once and you've got your community on check. Also, conversations are easier because all of a sudden you get instant feedback. You know if they like what you said or they didn't, and they can share your message if you're saying the right thing. So for businesses, it's much easier. At the same time, with the addition of the functionalities of like buy now or check into our store, it's just it's made the world much smaller.
Cool. Modoni, typically, what are the factors that guide how you choose the right social media content platform for your brand?
Okay, so I think for a lot of brands, you tend to think that you need to be everywhere at once, posting the exact same thing on different platforms. But if you've interacted with any of these platforms, you realize that very different content approaches and very different strategies actually work on different platforms. And so, for example, increasingly we're seeing that Twitter is moving from a purely text-driven platform to one that is a lot more visual. They're using a lot of video. They're using a lot of like large format photography. If we're looking at Instagram, that's a purely visual medium. TikTok is purely video, has no photography. And so I think it's about brands asking themselves the questions of, A, what kind of capacity do you have in-house to do something and do something extremely well? And then based on that, you select the medium that you will focus on. And this could be even, just a decision where you just say, we're good at written text, we're good at long form content. Let's stick to, say, a blog and establish thought leadership. Or we are actually very, very good and quirky, and we can actually do amazing work on, say, a medium such as TikTok, because we have the adaptability, the flexibility, as well as the in-house video editing and creative to actually make that work. So my advice to brands is pick a few social media assets, really focus on them, really get it right, as opposed to spreading yourself thin across all of them and doing, a sort of lukewarm job because of a result of that.
Thanks, Melody. Actually, that now follows on to what I want to ask Charles. Where do businesses actually get it wrong when it comes to social media and their campaigns? In the sense that what Melody just said is trying to be everything to everybody doesn't quite work, but where a specific example where people have actually completely got it wrong?
Good. So most businesses get it wrong in different ways. First and foremost, somebody comes into the office, tells you that you need to be on social media, or a fellow director from a different company tells you need to be on social media. So what you do, you go ahead and open accounts. We have about 22 social media platforms, different social media platforms, like name Facebook, the Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn, name them. There are quite a number, there are about 22 of them, and the number is still growing. And you open an account with your handle in all of them. Then after opening all that, you go home and never post anything on them. What that means, you've already created an opportunity to speak to people, but you're not using it at all. So you leave it and come back at after three months or 6 months, when somebody actually realizes we opened an account. Then the other one is you open an account. These are social platforms. The whole essence of having social platforms, that's why you're going for a network meetup. When you go for a network meetup, you people want to talk about what's going on in your life. Yet a business wants to keep selling. I'm selling you, let's say, an example, a pen that is not a big, let's say this particular pen, I'm selling it for this amount of money. But what will the pen do for me? You've not thought about the customer. You should always, the feedback online should always be focusing on the customer and what you can give as value to the customer. Another thing that people get wrong is you get people who do not know the company to run the social media platform. So what happens is somebody picks a phone, sets up the company account, goes home with it, yet he's just maybe assuming, quote unquote, an intern, or has just been in the company for less than 3 months. Then somebody asks a technical question like, what do you guys use to do, let's say, a technical aspect of the company? Yet you've never been to the industry to get to know what happens when you're making a particular product. Then you will not have an answer, or give a vague answer, which in essence now shows that you do not have brand equity and you don't know what actually happens in your company. These are just some of the things here.
Thanks, Charles. Dennis, how does the user's agent inform which social media platforms they're likely to use, and how does that play now into the social marketing and social and digital marketing?
Okay, well, it's part of what I like to tell my clients is digital marketing is still marketing. Okay, so when you're coming up with your strategy, the rules stay the same. Number one is your objective. Number two is understanding your audience. Now, when you interrogate those audiences, you realize that different social media platforms appeal because of their functionalities, some because of their novelty, to different age brackets. There's a reason why Facebook has been undisputed. I'm looking around my fellow panelists here, but yeah, you guys definitely look like the Facebook guys, okay?
As opposed to high five.
As opposed to high five, as opposed to Snapchat. So again, they gravitate to those platforms because of what they're looking for, and also because of the coolness of it. Also, because of the sense of community. So it's very unlikely for someone who's 19 to want to join my Facebook kind of engagement because there's no fun in it. Meanwhile, it's very difficult for me to try to engage on TikTok because I find making that video kind of hard. The more you understand your audience's dynamics and their habits, the easier it is for you to plan accordingly by platform, and then within the platform, give the communication that works with that age group. Because you have to get your tone and your vibe right. Otherwise, you'll miss the mark completely.
Thanks, Dennis. A question I want to ask now to Modani, and I think this is something that a lot of people are probably thinking about and have not sent the question through, so let me just ask the question. In regards to COVID-19, the World Health Organization announced an infodemic running parallel to the pandemic. How does one mitigate against misinformation, disinformation, and fake news?
So I think there are a couple of ways of looking at this. If we are thinking of institutions such as who have a lot of access to governance bodies that actually regulate tech, then they are able to actually influence policy to reduce misinformation spread on these platforms. And I think we saw it specifically with the pandemic, where WhatsApp limited some of its features of how much you could forward and so on and so forth. It's one of those things where, you know, from a policy direction, you can actually work with tech companies to improve the ecosystem in itself. That said, if you're running a campaign to basically counter misinformation, to counter disinformation and fake news, it just goes back to what Dennis was saying. The reality is marketing is still marketing, and so the principles still apply. And in this case, you have to think about reach, you have to think about frequency, and so that means that you will need to buy media, because in as much as opening a social media account is free, for your content to actually be seen, you need to actually pay for it. Organic reach is null nowadays, pretty much. And then the other two things that you need to think about from a content perspective is how is it going to resonate? So really thinking about the audiences that you're speaking to, the kind of language that you're using, and is it relevant? So is it timely? You know, you go back to all those traditional models that you're taught in school. Is it timely? Is it, you know, reaching the right person with the right message at the right time? And that's from a countering its perspective and from a comms perspective. So it's a two-pronged approach. If you're a large enough organization to influence policy, that's definitely a way to do it. And the second way is going back to, you know, the grassroots core principles of running a good communications campaign and also buying media in a good way.
Okay, I'm going to come back. That what you've just said, coming back now to the business side of things, what you said about your media strategy per se. Charles, is social media the best way to get a business advertised? I mean, you've got your traditional ways of doing it, or does it have to be a combination? But a lot of people seem to think that if I can put an advert up on Facebook, that should get me millions and millions and millions. But I'm just asking, is social media the best way to get a business advertised?
Well, depending, like Ndavi and Modani have said, again, marketing is still marketing. Now, depending on where in the funnel your business is, remember you also need to know what type of business. Because, for example, if I'm selling aircrafts, just a simple example, you don't find the person who buys an aircraft on Facebook. Maybe you'll find them somewhere on LinkedIn, or you find them, if you send them an email, they'll actually receive an email and read an email and have time to do that and engage on social. So yes, for particular brands, and no for others. It's typically based on the industry. Let's say if I'm selling a simple thing, if I'm selling, let's say an alcoholic drink, one company was selling an alcoholic drink, and then they sent an advert to the typical audience of people who would essentially consume that product, or people who are within a particular vicinity. Let's say if it's a normal vibrant club, then they'll get adverts served to them on those particular location. Yes, that works for that audience, but does not work for somebody else who's in a different location, when we already have location targeting on your phones. Yeah, so yes, and for some businesses, and no for others. However, it's good for brand building.
Okay, that's a safe answer. And speaking of brands, I want to ask Dennis, what can brands learn from online conversations?
Well, the best thing about the evolution of social media was, remember back then, you put up a website, You put up a website because you want people to see what you're doing. But then again, that was you talking out to them. With the advent of social media, you've invited them to have a conversation with you. Now when you're having a conversation, there's a wise man who said, you don't do social media, you be social. So all of a sudden, a brand has to talk like a human being. When you open yourself up to the social media space, you also have to be accepting of the response from the other person. So all of a sudden, brands have become more humane. They are forced to be more transparent. And becoming human, you have to develop a personalized relationship with that audience. So they are able to correct you, call you out when you're wrong, advise you. And also somebody else said, the head of your social media is actually your customer. So it's flipped the script completely. And the online conversation, a lot of them is what leads brands to decide on product changes, changes in their communication, or even shifts in their whole business system. Because now the customer is sitting in the boardroom with them. That's the beauty of the online conversation.
So it becomes an issue of the brand doesn't come to tell you what you want in terms of we think this is good for you, etc., etc. It's actually the end user who's telling them, this is what I'd like to see in my product, etc., etc., etc.
In fact, the brand says, this is who I am.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Okay. Okay, Modani, I just want to ask this question, because I know there's something that a lot of people are going to ask the same. What are the key issues focus for Kenyans right now on social media?
I don't think it's ever changed from, the beginning of time when man could speak and we could draw on cave walls. People will always talk about, politics, culture, entertainment, their romantic lives. They want to share their stories, their narratives. They want to be seen. And I think that last point is actually the biggest one, is that people nowadays want to be seen. And so you want to be an individual brand unto yourself. And depending on the subject area that you're in, that is what you want to be known for. And so we've seen, the growth of influencers. We've seen the growth of people becoming pundits and becoming thought leaders based off the content that they're actually putting online. And so I think one of the biggest things that has happened in Kenya and that has happened everywhere else in the world is this thing where the idea of a personal brand has become extremely strong, or rather more visceral, because of the mediums that people are engaging with.
Yes, thanks, Modani. I'm going to change gears slightly here. This links into a show. I'm going to tease what's going to happen next week, but I'm going to ask this question to Charles. If I was to say to you, hello, my name is John, or my name is Charles, and I'm a social media holic. Yeah, hi, Charles. I'm a social media holic. Is social media addiction actually an actual thing? And then it points to the aspect of how it affects people's mental health, because we've had a lot of instances where people have now committed suicide because of things they've been told or they've been teased on social media and things like that. So yeah, the addiction aspect of social media and the mental health aspect of social media. I'm going to start with Charles, but I'd like the other guests also to chime in where once Charles finishes, the different aspects that they might pick up from that.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting conversation because remember, mental health is a big issue. Now, one thing you need to understand, social media works with your brain. Literally, it's how people want to engage. It's about what you want to do. When you do this, how will it make you feel? It's about you. So anything that makes you not feel the way you want to feel, that becomes a problem. Let's say you have now the Generation Zs. Let's say you find a boy or a girl, teenager, maybe at the age of 17, stole their parents' phone, created an account. They now have a TikTok account with, let's say, 200 followers or 300 followers, and they've realized somebody in their class, let's say in the advent of the COVID period, we've been at home doing homeschooling and or streaming in and logging in online using gadgets. Someone creates an account, then they realize that whatever people are doing out there is not, my parents cannot afford to take me to Hawaii next weekend or take me to Bahamas anytime I want, or go to Mombasa anytime I want. but this other guy can actually do it. So what would happen is this person will actually leave and not be able to actualize themselves because mentally they're not content with what is happening in their life. And this draws them to do various things. They could decide it's time for me to end my life because I've just seen that everybody in my life who are my friends are growing, yet I'm not growing. But definition of growth at this point in time is really not something to question. But how do you guide people to talk about things that are relevant? You can't. Remember, it's an open space. I've logged into a platform. I expect to see something that I will like. Then you see, like there was a scenario we had sometime. There was one cartoon that was showing on YouTube that a cartoon that was actually telling people to cut themselves and stuff like that. Do you know what content your children or your friends are actually consuming online? Then you tell them, yes, they're addicted, yet they're on the phone all the time. Anytime you wake up in the morning, what do you do first? Do you, if you're married, look up to your wife and tell them good morning? If you're not, or if you're a jogger, do you wake up and start running, or do you wake up and check the time to see if the clock is okay? Or do you wake up and get in social media and see what the other guy did last night, or what the other guys were doing while you were asleep, or guys logged into a music stream at night but didn't go to the club, stuff like that? It actually has a mental impact on who you are, because the morning is when you shape what you want to achieve and who you want to be moving forward. Yeah.
I'll confess, the first thing I do when I wake up actually is check my WhatsApp. I'm sure many
yeah. So now you're John.
So Dennis Malani, depending on which one wants to jump in, please. Actually, I'll go with Malani. Your take on that aspect of addiction to social media.
I think there's the conversation to be had about the scale of harassment that can actually happen on social media. We've seen all these cases where people go wrong or do something wrong from a social perspective or whatever it is, and people get offended. And the scale of harassment and the scale of people sharing that information is huge. It can even go global. I think one of the famous ones was, I forget her name. I think her name was Renee. Has Renee landed yet? I don't know if you remember that, where this girl tweeted a joke before she got on a flight. It was racist, yes, but the scale at which, she had people coming down on her was huge. And so I think the biggest issue with social media and the biggest issue with digital is not just, the direct harassment of people that is that it can actually scale into spaces that you never even imagined. And so that has ramifications on mental health. It has ramifications on even how your life then pans out from that moment on, because it can essentially actually cancel you permanently for many opportunities. But I think there's also the conversation to be had around, again, the algorithms and how these platforms are actually built to be addictive, built to serve you certain content, and also built to expose you to a lot of people that you didn't want to be exposed to. And, we're seeing that with a lot of scams around social engineering. We're seeing it when people are being, targeted for harassment, and then new terms that are coming out of it, such as, for example, doxing, somebody taking your information on where you live, where you work, etc., and actually putting it on the internet. And so, I think it's a big question around scale, and also a question around how these platforms are built and how they're not built to actually ensure specific safeties if things do go wrong.
Thanks, Malani. I've just learned something new just now about you said doxing.
Yeah, so doxing is revealing your identity, and then somebody dumps it online so that people can actually come to your house or email your employer or rock up. Yes, it's called doxing.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. I think there was something to do with the movie where people then do frogging as well. Actually, I'm assuming people who do frogging get that information from doxing, then they come and live in your house and you don't know that it was an interesting movie. Dennis, your take on the effect of mental health and social media?
Well, for one thing, one cannot help but notice there are certain things that weren't there before. Okay, so I'll call them out. I'd never heard of body shaming 10 years ago. Okay?
What? Sorry?
Body shaming. Yeah?
Yep.
But now, because certain platforms are exposing the young people, particularly the girls, hey Modani, to just images of, waifly, slim people who are the ideal body type, younger people, particularly the teenagers who are most easily influenced by that, all of a sudden, in their bid to conform to just be like everybody else, what do? You have increased cases of anorexia now, people just starving themselves, getting all kinds of eating disorders. You have other cases where people are overly bleaching, okay? And that's particularly in Africa and some parts of Asia. You have other cases where people are influenced to do things that are harmful to them. For example, a youth who is exposed to seeing another youth who's consuming alcohol. So all of a sudden, they'll be prone to do that. Suicides because of cyberbullying and trolling, they're up as well. So we have to call it out because we know there's an issue. And about addiction, it also, I believe it exists because I checked today on the Global Web Index. For Kenya, the average daily time spent on social media is now 3.34 hours per day.
Wow.
That's average.
Yes.
Average for Kenya. For the younger audience, of course, it's much higher. All right. So what does that social media time eat into? Does it obviously eat into more productive time? I also read a study that said the teenagers who are listed as heavier social media users had generally experienced a drop in their GPAs. So there is an effect, but it has to be managed with responsibility because too much of anything is always a bad thing anyway.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Somebody has just put in a message to me saying, turn on your light, you're looking too dark. So thanks, Victoria, for that. Charles, okay. I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to change the script slightly, and then we'll come back to the business side of things. But assuming, okay, fine, I use social media, and I've put out on blast how this person is useless, they can't do anything right, yada, 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 which I have been known to do in the past. But now you go and apply for a job with them, and they do a background check or whatever the case. You know the way they can do credit reference checks and everything like that. So can this, your own personal use of social media, affect your business or your work?
Oh, definitely.
Or your appointment. We have a case just 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. Some young lady was given a appointment where a post was
the national park.
Yes.
Yeah, it actually has, there's something you need to always put in your head before you type in anything online. The internet never forgets. Always remember that. That's a keyword in anything you put. So you should always think in any sphere of your life, at whatever level it is. Is it now that I'm in slaying at 14 or trying to get myself in my midlife crisis in the 40s? If you want to become a president, they will find this data and they will come for you. So you should always be sensitive of what you put online, either as a brand or yourself, because immediately you're implicated, like the scenario we've been given by Martin there. That appointment, a presidential appointment, was actually brought to book on Twitter. Being Kenyans, we are known to cause people havoc on Twitter. If you have any history of some bad news or in some place where you behaved unethically, or something to warrant someone to make noise. So essentially, you should always take care of your digital footprint. Just take some time. Let's say tomorrow, go to Google, type in your name, press enter, check the search results. You will find something about you. Now, is it the right thing? Is it something you want to keep to the future? That is up to you. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Dennis, because you're full of statistics, I could see you looking over and taking notes and everything. I want to ask this question. So, in terms of what you just told us, how does social media affect attention span of people over time? Do they become doulas because they're so used to whatever, they're so used to actually engaging on that platform, they can't actually interact on a normal scale, one-to-one. But yeah, attention span affect by social media. And then Maloney, I'm going to come to you with a question about budgets and social media.
All I'd say is this. It'll only make you daft if it's distracting you from the thing that you're supposed to be doing. Okay? For example, back then, an employer, most offices used to switch off social media because it would distract people from their work. So in most offices, there was no access to YouTube or Facebook because someone would say, "Oh, you guys are just spending all day going on social media."
Yeah.
Okay. Flash forward, 2020. All of a sudden, every employee is now a brand ambassador for their employer. So it's imperative that they have access to social media so that they can continue advocating for the company. So I'd say it does not make you daft. It does not. All it does is, if you let it supersede the rest of your life, there'll be a payback.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. I think that's very succinctly put. Mulvani, now I'm going to come to another aspect of money. How do you maximize on social media marketing on a limited budget? I've got a shoestring. I can't afford these big campaigns. Or put another way, how much money do you have to spend to get good returns on social media?
So I like to think of it in terms of the media content split. So always spend less on content, more on media, because media is what actually gets you the eyeballs of your content. And so if you have a budget and you're looking at a pot, spend about 30 to 40% on content, 60 to 70% on buying media. Now, when you're buying media, it's pertinent for you to think about A, how much money you have, and B, how many people you want to reach, and C, what type of content you actually have. And so if it's static content, then maybe stick to platforms that do well with static content. If it's visual video content, then stick to platforms that do visual and video really well. And the other thing to also consider is the kind of costs that different platforms charge. So for example, Twitter is quite an expensive platform in comparison to, say, Facebook. And so if you have a limited budget, you'd rather spread it on a platform that will actually take your dollars much further than putting it somewhere that's a little bit more pricey, where your dollars won't spread. That said, if you're looking at B2B, if you're looking at leads campaigns where you're looking to actually build leads and things like that, then putting yourself on a platform such as Twitter, which is a little bit more expensive, will allow you for more leads. I think we all know, in general, even in the marketing world, leads are some of the most expensive things you could ever get, even in traditional media. And so if that's what you're aiming for, essentially, then just know you'll need to spend a little bit more money. If it's just about, mass awareness and did you see my advert? Did you understand what it was about? Did you understand what I was trying to say? Then you can also take, sort of like your more mass-driven type platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, etc.
Next one, actually, Charles, I want to ask you something that follows up on that. What tools are used to manage social media, or how do you tell if social media is working for your business? In terms of how do you then try and get somebody to understand the so-called definable return on investment from social media?
Good. Now that's what we call measuring. So I'd assume that you've opened a company, you've set up, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram, and you need to create content for each of the three platforms. You even have a WhatsApp business number. You need to create content for those different platforms. Yet the person who's in charge, if you have to check, if you have about, let's say in a case where you're managing an account with 10,000 followers on Instagram, you can't imagine the amount of content that comes in, especially when you have the 10,000 followers, then you're still doing a campaign running online. So we have things like Hootsuite, where you can actually log into one dashboard and have multiple, you have a dashboard that has different social media platforms. Then you can create funnels, creating filters about what happens on this particular media, what happens on the rest. So that when you're actually doing a post, it is essential for particular, where you can do something called cross-posting, only if the media is essential for the other platform that you're posting to. You have things like Iconosquare, we have Buffer. Facebook have actually released a very good system. That's if you're only on Facebook. On Instagram, it's called Creator Studio. So basically on your page, just type in Creator Studio, then you'll find a place where you can actually create a post and it automatically shared on the other platform. But remember, again, for Facebook, you need more images and more content on Instagram, while on Facebook you have the type of content that you put on Facebook can be totally different from what is on Instagram. But yeah, there are quite a number.
Okay, Dennis, I'm assuming you're looking prettier now that you're like, yeah, okay, that's not too bad. Two things. I think the ones that come to mind right now, Lanky Box, because of my daughter, and Cookie Soul C. How is it possible to make a living on social media without selling a single product?
Okay, I'll answer it this way. You're talking about a physical product, right?
Okay, yeah.
All right. Both Wes, me and you, we know a group of guys, Akina Devi, and what's the trending thing now? The DJs are live streaming shows,
Yes.
okay?
Yep.
And reaching thousands of people on social media, and that is the new in thing, okay? That's one. Two, aside from and with live streaming, all of a sudden, with live streaming, people are getting endorsements, and people are becoming the new trend because now they're content creators. As long as you're giving value through that interaction, you do not have to sell a good. Okay? But at the same time, while you're doing that, whatever content you're putting out there must be sellable and consumable. Yes. So it's possible. So tell them, hope is alive.
Okay. You've all heard it there from Dennis. Modani, I know we're going to run out of time, so I want to ask Modani this question, and I'm going to start trying to bring everybody in at the same time. Why is branding in the age of social media hit or miss?
Okay. I think it's definitely a hit if done well. If you understand the mediums you're engaging with, you understand the audiences that you want to speak to, you have clarity on your strategy, but also where you want to exit in terms of the outcome and the impact that you're hoping to get out of it, then it's definitely a hit. I think where it becomes a miss is, where sometimes you see brands are trying too hard, they're trying to fit in with the lingo, it's not making sense. They're spreading themselves too thin. They're not putting in effort on, say, media buying, but are spending a lot of money in creating content, which then doesn't get seen. So, I think we keep saying it, and I know it just sounds like it's repetitive, but the reality is, the truth is, social media is just a tool. It's just a platform. The same principles of marketing still apply, and the same practices, good practice of marketing, still definitely apply for it to either be a hit or a miss.
Okay, in fact, of what you just said about social media being a tool, Black Lives Matter, hashtag Black Lives Matter. How has social media actually come into play, especially when it comes to aspects of human rights violations? I'll start that question to Charles.
Good. So you spoke about Black Lives Matter. We realized, like when it was trending, whatever was happening in the US, so sad. Remember, I'm also Black, so it was something that very close to my heart. So Black Lives Matter, try to tell you, is you have people who actually get to see and depict what's happening in the world. We all see these things. Remember, social is about creating content. And the content that we create could have diverse effects. It could either be a positive effect or a negative effect. So a dashcam that records, for example, the scene that we had of the Black Lives Matter, and that brought about people going in online and creating black profiles. I don't know if you saw, there are people who are posting on all the social media platforms, they're just putting in black and either not saying anything or typing something. It was just a clear message trying to say that the world is in solidarity with what is going on. But social media has a really big part to play on human rights violations and how people, whatever happens based on the content that is shared on those particular platforms. Over to you.
Okay. Dennis and Modani, I want to just, there's going to be a question about influencing of social media as a whole, but I want to just see whether you can chime in there with regards to human rights violations.
What I noticed over the last 2 years was social media being used as a tool for good. As Charles, what you were saying before, with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, did you notice after those earlier instances 2 years ago, you'd have a lot of guys, black guys like us, who'd be confronting cops while holding their camera.
Yeah.
And that became a deterrent. You ever see those videos? And all of a sudden, you're telling, hey, you're on camera, we're watching.
Yes.
And you actually realize that audience, they knew that social media is a tool that can be your defense in the light of a media rights violation. So that really blew my mind. And I think we're also seeing it in Kenya today and across the rest of the world. So it's been adopted. So I think that's a great evolution.
Modani?
Yeah, I think that change essentially happens through very specific ways. The first is a shift in social norms. So as Dennis has said, documenting these incidences has given them sort of like a proof point that people can use to begin to push for actual change. And actual is actually the wrong word. If there's change in social norms, that's change. But change in terms of even changing policy, bringing these conversations not just to a national stage or to, these things that we say, you whisper things in culture. So as Black people, we've always known that, racism is something that we deal with. If you're a woman, you've always known that sexism and misogyny is something that you deal with. So it removes it from that space of, sort of like intra-community conversations into a conversation and dialogue that is being held by different voices. But I think what I would like to really call out even the most is that it begins to force technology companies to actually do the right thing. And we saw with Black Lives Matter, a lot of technology companies were held to task by those activists. One of the famous cases being that Amazon actually banned the police from using its facial technology recognition software to identify activists and harass them. You've had, people holding TikTok to account around the Hong Kong protests. And so it also begins to force for the ecosystem in itself to actually improve their practice as far as governance is concerned and as far as safety is concerned when it comes to freedom of expression, protest, and movement.
Okay, and just following on that train of thought, and we'll come back to aspects of education as well. 2010, this was now the 10 years ago we are talking about. That was when the Arab Spring movement happened. But now moving forward and looking ahead, I want to ask this question. That actually ties into what you said. Is the influence of social networks sometimes overrated? As in, do people then just go and put it on because they think that it's going to get them heard, and then sometimes they will make all this noise and nothing happens? So are there aspects where it can actually be overrated?
Okay, I think we'll pick it up. It is, I would not say overrated, because sometimes the things that are done and they take action. Let me give you a case in point. Like just on Wednesday, I'm a cyclist. We do that for fun. So some guy on Saturday, one of our cyclists was on Thika Road, along Thika Road, and he was actually unfortunately knocked down by a bus, and the bus was recorded on camera. And using social media, we were able to find the bus and the driver, and they were actually arrested. The DCI actually takes up these roles. The government is using these measures, if you check from what people are posting, to make decisions on what is done, because people complain about something, it is seen online by the right authority. And if you notice, even on our different government ministries in the country, they've started embracing social media as a tool which can be used to actually do sensitization and awareness, even as we talk about the COVID pandemic. So yes, all the updates are going online, everything's going online. There is something being done. It is not overrated. Well, in some aspects, yes, but to things that actually matter, it is a vital tool for communication.
Ronnie?
I think, social media is expected to do a lot more than what it's meant to do, right? And so you cannot social media yourself out of bad governance. You cannot social media yourself out of, systemic failure. So it's unfair to expect that social media was going to fix all the problems that the Arab Spring activists were raising. And I think, to echo what Charles is saying, the reality is social media does work based on what it's meant to do, which is to amplify voices, which is to ensure that people are able to express themselves, and also to get those voices into the right halls of power that, were essentially inaccessible before to a large majority of people, in order to drive change. And I think, I'm going to use a funny example, right? We remember that ugly lion that was put in Nairobi that everybody hated in the city, right? Which was an eyesore. People complained about it so much, within one day it was changed, So it can be, little things that are as mundane as that, all the way to actual, very big policy changes, very big policy decisions from a governance perspective.
Don't forget,
that's a very good example.
Yeah. There's also the aspect of the DJ incident somewhere, and you remember something was done about it. I won't mention names. And yes, people spoke on Twitter. So was that information relevant, and did it help in take action to a powerful person? Yes, it did. So there you have it. Social media actually works for the right things at the right time to the right audience.
But it also has a converse effect. Sometimes that social media can have a negative, as I think what Modani was saying, sometimes where something is put out and somebody's lambasted or unfairly targeted for whatever personal reasons people might have.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Shades Challenge over the weekend? You remember there was a challenge that was going on. I won't mention names again, just for not being so political about it. You know what was going on back there. So yeah, that was taken up. Yes, it was an accident. Then we even had to be shown of the person being taken using a police chopper, so that it's actually evidence to the public that something is going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Martin, I'm seeing, as usual, we're overrunning. So there's a question you had about education, and I think I saw a question from one of our audience members. I know there's been many. There's one that I saw that's quite interesting. I just want to ask this last question. And again, it goes to everybody. We'll keep it tight and bright. Insofar as what I've at least come across and what I've looked at, there are 2,374 books on social media. So, at this date, what does social media mastering of social media add really to the conversation? I'll start with Moni on that one.
I like to look at it this way, and this is how things just reveal your age. If you think about when the TV was invented, and you think of the kind of ads we used to see on TV, what happened is that because marketers didn't know how to deal with that medium, is they used to put print adverts on TV. And with every evolution of different sort of like platforms and technology tools, it takes a while for marketers to catch up. It takes a while for any content creator to catch up. And so with social media, that's one of those tools that, because as I said before, these tech companies keep changing how the platforms work, you're consistently working to catch up in terms of building the capacity for it, in terms of building the skill for it. And so it's one of those spaces where you will consistently be a student and not an expert in. I don't believe in social media experts, but that, again, that's just my personal view on it.
Okay. Dennis?
What I like to advise clients is, first, you clarify that you're not a social media guru. Always clarify that. Okay. Because that'll lead you to another pothole down the road. But part of the process of creating a digital media strategy, the second last stage is launch your pages and post. Okay. The last stage after that is keep learning, because the more you keep doing it yourself, the better you'll get at it. And because the more you become comfortable with being in the social space and communicating socially, you'll be in a better position to adapt to the next innovation, which I guess is just down the road. Okay. So the key is to start, okay? Become a digital native. And once you're in that space, learning and growing with it, come naturally. But you have to be a digital native first.
Okay, Charles?
Like Ndavi has said, you can't, and Muthoni as well, like you can't quite say that you're an expert on a particular field, because remember, it changes every day. Just around March, some of us did not know about Zoom. I didn't say, I'm not mentioning names, but at the moment, everybody can tell you to mute your mic. That's the in thing now. I don't have a good connection, or clean your camera like someone just did. Like, so this is how things that are actually changing. But you're not, back in the day, we had books, like you could buy a book and it's, if you remember, there's Microsoft Word for Dummies, and it has every topic about, if it's Excel for dummies, social media for dummies, it's there. But is it conclusive enough? No. You keep learning, you keep discovering, find out new things, because algorithms change, data changes, the system, the profiles, how they do things changes. Twitter just the other day released, have now allowed people to comment using threads, things that did not essentially exist. You can actually choose who sees the content. These are things that keep evolving, and there's no way you can know everything, because just when you know it, something new comes up. So you just have to keep learning.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Martin, there's a question that you needed to ask.
Yeah, there's a question from Felix Onyango. And I know Muthoni actually touched on it, but maybe she can very quickly just respond. What products work better on what platforms? For example, selling clothes on Instagram versus Twitter, and so on and so forth. Let's just give Felix an answer, please.
Yes, as I had mentioned, I think it's about, making sure what is your strategy and then aligning to that. So clothes are a very visual sort of like product, but also what Instagram allows you to do, which is fantastic, is you can actually complete the purchase on the page if you set up your Instagram in that sort of way. And so somebody can actually buy the product off the page and complete the transaction without ever having to leave the platform. And so all of these considerations are considerations you should have in mind when you're setting up effort around a specific platform, so that you can see what actually works best for your strategy, and then you emphasize a majority of your effort on it.
Okay, and that was actually, there's a question I had there about B2C and B2B, but I know we're going to run out of time, but it will be a nice follow-up actually in terms of continuing this conversation somewhere down the line. Charles, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so now on social, the person who wants a friend who wants to sell clothes. Let me try and give you an example. Anytime on Twitter, at any point in time, we have within 10 seconds of your posting, there are 7 other people who've posted content on Twitter. So that means what depicts you from being the person. It's more conversational, like tease of a sale. Like Muthoni has said, you can get the full process on Instagram better and on Facebook than you would on Twitter. So it would be wise to know, if you have a target audience and you just customize that audience, then serve that ad and show them those dresses, show them how it works, make sure they're authentic, and write customer reviews and show reviews of how customers have actually happy customers, so that people can believe and trust in your product. Otherwise, you can also be, you do not exist, because people sell, there's been a lot of dubious businesses running online. So just make sure you're authentic and show your customers that they're happy, and everybody else will just come crawling. Yeah.
Actually, you just brought up demons about somebody who conned me, a company that conned me online, but then that's a story for another day. Right. The part we always get to, obviously, parting shots. What you'd like to say as a parting shot with regards to social media and all its nuances. I'm going to start with Dennis, come to Charles, and finish with Muthoni.
There's an interesting quote I got from someone in training, and they said, content is fire. Social media is its gasoline.
Sorry, repeat that. Social media is just?
Is its gasoline. Petrol.
Correct.
I like that. That's actually... Okay, that's cool. Charles?
I'll mail you.
Please.
So.
Yes. So now, my parting shot would be simple. if you think your business is ready for social media, if you want to create it, if you want to get there, make sure you're objective in what you want to do, know in which process of the marketing funnel you actually want your customers to do, or the people essentially you want to reach out to. Make sure you know what you're doing. If you don't know, you can always consult experts to find out what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong and push it to the next level, because social media works. Yeah.
You heard it from Charles right there. I like the way he points at the end.
Yeah.
You better believe. You better believe.
Yes.
I think my parting shot is to not dismiss the amount of effort it takes to be successful on social media. I always feel like it's one of those things that's considered, like the stepchild in the marketing bouquet of effort and spend. I think social media is one of those things that if you do give it as much effort as you can, you will essentially reap the reward. So it is a platform that does require effort. It is a platform that does require, repeated learning, repeated iterations. So definitely effort is something that you must consider in your strategy when it comes to digital tools.
So in other words, ignore it at your own peril.
Yep.
Okay,
Good.
guys, thank you so much. As usual, we've overrun. I'd like to say this conversation, there was a myriad of questions which we've not asked. So, Martin, I know we're always threatened, but we do have to have this conversation picked up again.
We have to have it. And from what I've had to this evening, I think the next time we talk, the topic is social media, will be focused. So social media on maybe sensitization, or social media for marketing, and do a whole show that's just specific on marketing and or digital campaigns or whatever, because it's so broad. I feel we still haven't addressed much about it. We're still at the introductory level. Hatujafika chapter 1.
Yeah,
yes.
Agreed.
So anyway, thank you so much for coming on. Waweru, do you have anything to say?
I am
Before
good, thank you.
Yeah, and I think I'll close the show with a quote from one Dave Willis, who says, "Don't use social media to impress people. Use it to impact people." And I think that's my parting shot.
Yeah, awesome.
Good night, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. Keep following, and remember to subscribe, and so you can get reminders of each time the show is going on air. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.